Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blind Buys, a podcast where we watch and discuss movies we've bought sight unseen. I'm Josh, and with me, as always, is my collector in crime, Jesse.
Hey, everybody, and thanks for joining us for our 14th episode, where we'll be covering the British folk horror film, or is it? Question mark, to be discussed later. Witchfinder General, which was my pick, and I watched it on the 88 Films 4K, so we're excited to get to that at the bottom of the hour. But first off, I just wanted to say thanks again to Violet from the Tomb of Treasure here in Seattle for joining us for last episode to talk about Hardware, which was a really fun discussion, a movie I might not have gotten to for some time if she hadn't brought it to our attention, and to just hear more about running the Tomb, what it takes to run a physical media shop. And it was a really fun discussion, so I would highly recommend if you didn't catch that one. If the title of the film didn't catch your eye, there was a fun discussion with a small business owner about what it takes to be out here in these streets slinging discs. She's fighting the good fight. Thanks to Violet.
Yeah, it was an awesome time, a great conversation, so definitely check it out. So as we do at the top of each episode here, Jesse, we talk about what we've been watching lately. Any notable watches for you?
Yeah, for sure. Right after we recorded last time, it's on the later side for me and certainly for you when we finish recording, and I like to squeeze a little something in to kind of wind down. And I had an hour-long documentary on the top of my pile that I had just picked up in the recent Vinegar Syndrome sale, and that was Wildwood, New Jersey, from AGFA.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And this was just a delightful, kind of amazing short doc made in 1995 by an all-women crew in Wildwood, New Jersey, which is a sort of seaside town, or 1994, pardon me, seaside town in New Jersey, with a boardwalk, kind of all the typical summer trappings. And it sort of starts off as this kind of very much a nostalgic look back on what it means to spend your summers in a town like Wildwood, with interviews from people who had been coming there all their lives. But before long, it kind of really goes into examining the lives of the women who spend their summers, and some of whom are maybe live there also and work there seasonally. The women who spend their summers in Wildwood, and it turns into this very candid exploration of their lives, like love and sex and relationships, and just a really incredible kind of both a portrait of a time and a place, but also just, exploring what it's like for these women, what summer means for them, and all the things that sort of come with summer, like summer romance, which sounds great and fun, but, depending on which side of it you're on. And the fact that it was filmed by, an all-women crew, they just kind of, I think, got a look into what was going on there that a bunch of guys walking around with cameras might not have gotten. So that was really amazing. I grew up not going to we went to the Jersey Shore once or twice, but if you grew up in the 90s, this is just, aside from the amazing content of the documentary, it just really takes you back. So that was really a fun watch.
Nice. Yeah, I got to check this out. I didn't pick up the AGFA release that this came out on, but hearing you sing its praises and seeing other people talk about it as well, I'm really interested in this.
Yeah, there's a couple other shorts, and the filmmakers did a feature-length commentary on it, which I would love to listen to sometime, because I wouldn't be surprised if they they didn't do updates on the disc of where these women are now, but I would imagine they would have some context like that, which would be interesting to listen to. And there's a couple other short docs sort of in the same vein. There's one about the Roosevelt Field Mall in Long Island, which I've gone to before, and it's just wild to see teenagers smoking in an indoor mall. It's when times were different. And I got to the theater to see Minions and Monsters with my son.
Nice. Okay.
This was my first Minions experience, my first Despicable Me experience. So, and honestly, I think I waited for the right one, because this kind of just really checked all the boxes. I didn't need to know any lore about what a minion is, or because I think this is kind of just a different set of minions from what I can understand. But they basically give you everything you need to know in the setup, that these guys have been serving different masters for a long time. And two of them in particular like telling stories, and they find their way to Hollywood in the 1930s, and they get to make movies. So there's a lot of really fun, for me, and I think for anyone who listens to a podcast like this, homages to just early Hollywood stuff that to me was delightful, and I laughed a whole bunch, and my son thought it was hilarious. And by the end, it kind of turns into a typical kind of like a computer generated monster fest. Like they have to defeat the monster, which was well done for what it was. But the first half definitely hit for me pretty hard. So yeah, Minions and Monsters.
Yeah,
Good time at the movies.
I'm gonna try to check this out once it gets on digital or Peacock or whatever, because I'm not a very big Minions fan. I prefer the Despicable Me movies, but the setup of this one is so intriguing and so different from anything that they've done in the past that I was really eager to see how it would work out. Like, were they really leaning into, the classic cinema homages, like as much as the trailers made it seem? That's kind of what I'm interested in. So yeah.
Yeah. And I can't remember if I mentioned it on mic last time, but I also was lucky to get out to see Alex Cox's latest film. He of Repo Man fame. He has a new movie coming out called Dead Souls, which is actually an adaptation of a Nikolai Gogol novella or short story or something. I think it's a novella, or it was going to be a novel in 3 parts. He only wrote 2 of the parts or something like that. But it's a Western that he also stars in. And he came to Seattle and showed it down at Central Cinema and did a Q&A after. So I got to go to that. And that was just, the movie was really good, but just getting to see somebody like Alex Cox in person was a real treat. He's about as independent as it gets, so he had lots of great stories about what it's taken to get his movies made, including in this sort of latter part of his career where he's done a lot of Kickstarter. I think he's raised money for the last 2 or 3 of his films via Kickstarter, and it's worked really well for him. And he knows how to make a movie on a budget. And it was billed as his last movie, but I get the feeling that he's probably going to try to do more because he seems still full of vitality. He's I think he's 73. He seems a bit younger than that, and he's acting in this Western and also directing it. So I can only assume that we're going to get maybe a couple more if he can keep getting the money to do it, because he just loves making these movies.
Oh yeah, and there are folks older than him,
totally.
still cranking out movies all the time. So he could do it if he wanted to, I'm sure.
Yes, including one Michael Mann, which he actually had a Michael Mann anecdote that he told during the during the Q&A, which someone asked. I forget how it came up, but I think he was talking about just his love of Westerns generally. I think somebody asked, what are some other Western novels that you would recommend to people? And he said one of the ones he listed was Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, and he said he actually tried to get Blood Meridian. He wanted to do Blood Meridian sometime 20 years ago maybe, but at the time he said Michael Mann owned the rights to produce and direct it, I guess, and he approached him with an idea of what he would want to do if he could, if Mann would produce it and Cox would direct it. And Michael Mann apparently said, what you've brought here is a very interesting idea, but this is a film and I make movies. And Alex Cox said, well, what's the difference between a movie and a film? And Mann said $50 million.
Oh.
So that was, he was just full of stories like that. So that was great. And the movie itself was good. It's very much like a stranger comes to town sort of film, but with very metaphysical overtones to it. It almost feels kind of like a parable of sorts. But yeah, adapted from this Russian novella, which is just cool to see, like the change in setting. But it totally makes sense. I haven't read it, but based on what he said about the story, it makes sense. And he just was like, yeah, I love making movies in the desert. And the desert does a lot of kind of instant production design for you because everything looks so amazing. You don't really have to do too much to dress it up. So yeah, Dead Souls, if it comes to a art house cinema near you, check it out to see Alex Cox in front of and behind the camera.
How was the turnout at that event?
It was sold out. Yeah, it sold out
awesome.
like a week before. So a lot of people who were filmmakers themselves or, aspiring to, so people had lots of really great questions just about his process. And so great to see it with a packed crowd of people who kind of know what's up. I feel like we don't get, outside of festival time for SIFF and whatnot, I don't feel like we get too many directors coming through showing their stuff. So when I saw that he was coming, I was like, I have to jump on this. So I was grateful to be able to do that. And the last one I'll mention, over the weekend, my wife and I were able to do a date night to see The Invite, Olivia Wilde's new film, with Seth Rogen and Edward Norton and Penelope Cruz and Olivia Wilde herself, and I really had a great time with it. I don't want to say too much about the setup because I didn't really know anything about it going in. It's an adaptation of I think a Spanish film perhaps, which is an adaptation of a play. So this story is out there in a number of different formats. But yeah, the basic setup: two couples, one couple invites another couple over for dinner, and things ensue. Relationships are tested. And it was really funny. I mean, I was laughing throughout. Like most people in my theater were laughing. It was kind of like a really funny, at times, like sex comedy of the type that feels kind of like we don't really do it that much anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was grateful to see it in the theater with people because just laughing with people is fun. And there was also some deeper stuff at play that, will get you thinking if you're of a certain age and you're married. So check it out.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to this one. Almost certainly will not be seeing it in theaters though, just because of timing and everything. But
sure.
Definitely checking it out at home. So it seems like Olivia Wilde is back after "Don't Worry, Darling." Whatever happened there?
Yeah, I didn't see it, and I mean, partly it was just timing, but also I kind of felt like based on the reception that she was going to be sent to director jail, which I feel like happens to female directors at a rate higher than men. So I was like, I hope she gets to make a movie again soon. And this one's really good. She's got it. The direction definitely, there's definitely choices. You can see choices that were made that were excellent. So she's got it. I think this is maybe the first movie that she's directed that I've seen. Booksmart. I've seen Booksmart. Yeah, I've seen Booksmart. So yeah,
okay,
she's like, great. Yeah.
I was like, if you haven't seen Booksmart, we got to get that on the show
right,
next.
yes.
I could go for hours on Booksmart, I'm sure.
Yes. No, I love Booksmart. So I'm glad she's back and excited to see what she does next. And it's the best thing I feel like I've seen her acting in also. So yeah, nice. Recommended all around. What about you? What have you been watching?
Not a ton, to be honest. I feel like I've said this for several weeks now, but it's been a slow couple of weeks for me. Lots of falling asleep in the middle of a movie late at night and then trying to pick it up again days later, which is becoming the norm. So I'm getting used to it. Since we talked about hardware last, I checked out Party Girl, which is Daisy von Schurler-Meyer's 90s comedy starring Parker Posey as she's kind of like a club promoter type wannabe person living in New York City who, due to some circumstances, ends up working at her aunt's library and kind of learning about herself and what she wants out of life because of that. And I thought it was really, really great. Pretty funny, but definitely worth revisiting again for me at a time when I'm not watching it in like 15-minute chunks. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you watch the Fun City Blu-ray or did you watch it somewhere else? Yeah, nice. Yeah, I watched that in desk set in library school with my nerdy librarian fellow library students. So yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, it's really great. And I especially love how quickly the Parker Posey character becomes obsessive about the library and the Dewey Decimal System, where she goes to all this trouble to learn about the Dewey Decimal System. And then the first time somebody messes up her work, she like flips out at them. I liked the kind of romance that's hinted at throughout, even though I don't feel like where it ends is necessarily as earned as I would have wanted. But again, I think that might just be a function of me needing to revisit this. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I just saw, if anyone listening down in Portland, I believe that the Hollywood Theater is going to be screening this in conjunction with some convention that's happening down there in September, and Parker Posey will be in attendance.
Oh, man.
So if you can get in on those tickets, if they haven't had a ticket lottery by the time you hear about this, look into that. Hollywood Theater, Parker Posey, just one of the absolute queens. I would love to see that.
Yes, in person. Yep. Can you imagine?
Yep.
Let's see. I did a couple of horror rewatches. I think you and I rewatched Evil Dead Rise both.
It was like the same day. Yes, I think we watched on the same day as it happened. Yes.
Yeah, and man, it's just brutal stuff, but that was the first time watch for me. Yeah. Some sick shit in that movie, but I really love it. And this was the first time I had seen it since I saw it in theaters back in 2023, I guess. And yeah, there are some images in that movie that have not left my brain since I first saw it. So revisiting it again was a really fantastic experience. And Also rewatched Sleepaway Camp, which is just one of my all-time favorite movies ever, ever, ever. So actually, Agfa and Fangoria are putting on a U.S. tour of Sleepaway Camp this summer. They're calling it the Midnight Mass Experience, and it's hosted by the drag queen Peaches Christ, and Felissa Rose, the original Angela herself, is going along to each stop on this tour. And they stopped at the Texas Theater in Dallas this past week, and I really wanted to try to go, and I couldn't swing it, but I decided to rewatch Sleepaway Camp just in honor of what could have been. And I mean, what to say about Sleepaway Camp? It's just my favorite slasher movie. It's the movie that changed the way that I view what horror could be, and it really opened my eyes to other movies that I didn't know existed before that I now choose to seek out all the time. So I've really, really loved going back to it again. It had been a couple of years, but I've got so much of this movie memorized, it didn't matter.
Yeah, I've only seen it once. I caught up with it a few years ago, and it a fascinating horror movie that's kind of been, I guess, kind of be reclaimed by the queer community in a really kind of interesting way. Which, given if you've seen the movie, you might watch it and perhaps not know what to make of it. But yeah, it's really a staple of the genre for sure.
I checked out the movie Playroom, otherwise known as Schizo, directed by Manny Coto and starring Christopher McDonald. This was put out by Vinegar Syndrome on Blu-ray a couple of years ago, I think, but I decided to pick it out of the stack and check it out over the past week. And it is extremely entertaining, very well made, surprisingly well made. Because I think I went into this viewing kind of thinking it was going to be, pretty trashy and low budget, but very competently directed. And it does leave a lot to the imagination on the violence side of things, but I think it's extremely effective. And Christopher McDonald is just giving like the most powerhouse performance in this movie, because he's going insane throughout the film, kind of retracing his father's steps, who was an archaeologist, and some terrible things happened when his character was a kid, and so going back to the archaeological site where his family was killed stirs up some bad memories and some old friends. So Playroom is definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it, or any of the listeners out there haven't seen it.
Nice. It sounds like a fun mix of stuff you've been catching up with. And one thing we wanted to note, we learned yesterday of the passing of Sam Neill, which is just as a 90s kid, as a Jurassic Park kid, I mean, just a really just a wonderful presence. I then later came to know more of his work from just the really weird. He was kind of like a weird horror king, like obviously going back to Possession, but even throughout the 90s, I mean, that's kind of like a lot of what he did. Yeah, amazing movies like Event Horizon, one of my absolute favorites growing up, that really scared the shit out of me, but also that I found strangely entrancing. Yeah, like Event Horizon, Daybreakers, his work with John Carpenter. So, and it just seems like he was one of the nicest people. Also, like all the tributes that had been pouring out from people he worked with, whether it was for across many projects or even just for a couple scenes, people had nothing but the nicest things to say about him. So really an unfortunate loss. So a few movies I've added to my watch list that I want to catch up with. Dead Calm, a film that he appeared with Nicole Kidman in. It's like a kind of like a ocean at sea thriller, directed by Philip Noyce, who's just like a really solid director of thrillers. So yeah, Dead Calm. He directed this film called. It's about the New Zealand film scene.
Is it a documentary?
Yeah, it's a documentary. It's called Cinema of Unease, A Personal Journey by Sam Neill, and it's just kind of like talking about his own experiences with the New Zealand film industry and sort of like some of its history. So that's something like a short doc that he directed. And the other one that I added to my watch list was Sleeping Dogs, which I believe might have been his feature film debut. I'm not sure if this was before or after the Omen film. But yeah, I've also heard good things about that one. So yeah, a few Sam Neill films that I hope to catch up with soon in tribute to his legacy.
Have you seen the BBC miniseries of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None?
No.
He plays a pretty large role in that, and I was obsessed with Agatha Christie in high school, and this adaptation of that book came out around that time, and I've seen it probably at least 3 times, the miniseries all the way through. He's really good in it. Definitely worth checking out. While talking about Sam Neill, I've got an interesting coming soon to own pick, so we can roll right into that segment now.
Coming soon to own on video and DVD.
So my first pick here is the 10th anniversary 4K edition of Taika Waititi's Hunt for the Wilderpeople. So the letterbox description for this is, Ricky is a defiant young city kid who finds himself on the run with his cantankerous foster uncle in the wild New Zealand bush. A national manhunt ensues, and the two are forced to put aside their differences and work together to survive. This is one of Taika Waititi's best-loved films. Other people out there can argue on the continued quality or lack thereof of his work in the past few years. But this one really hit me in the heartstrings, and I think it's really going to hit differently now that Sam Neill has passed, because, you know, this character starts out very cantankerous, but the bond that grows between him and the kid Ricky throughout the film is really sweet to watch. And it's got critical acclaim. Lots of people love it. And this 4K edition comes to us from Vision's home video, and it'll be coming in August. So I think it'll be a great way to remember Sam Neill. For me, it's probably picking up this one that I don't currently own, but really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, I've only seen Hunt for the Wilderpeople once, but I really loved it, and I think it feels like a really rare sort of two-hander between a seasoned actor and a kid, because the kid is brilliant. He's a great actor. But I feel like a lot of these now just turn into really kind of grating films. If it is a partnership between a kid and an adult, it can be a lot about how annoying the kid is. But this doesn't really fall into that trope. I mean, there is some of, like, you know, he's kind of a cranky old man, but before long the two of them are really on an adventure together. And I think it's just kind of a great testament to Sam Neill that he was able to establish chemistry with this kid and work with him, and just for it to feel so natural.
Yeah, great stuff. My next pick is from Transmission. We've gotten a new release announcement from them. This is a 4K edition of Who Can Kill a Child, which is a crazy title for me to write in this document and say out loud. But basically this revolves around a young couple, Tom and Evelyn from England. They're planning a getaway to a remote Spanish island. And when they arrive, it says their destination is almost entirely deserted, with the exception of a number of children who are all acting strangely. This is directed by Narciso Ibáñez Serrador, the legendary master of horror. This is Transmission's words, dubbed the Spanish Hitchcock. There are a lot of superlatives in this description, but I mean, based on Transmission's, you know, current output and what we know is coming, this does feel like something that's going to be right up my alley. So I'm definitely interested in checking this out. And this is one of their, you know, boxier 4K releases, which is probably going to take up some shelf space. But I am making it my mission to try to get as many of these as I can, since I've kind of gotten it on the ground floor with Transmission. So yeah, definitely checking it out.
Excellent. Yeah, me too.
One more for me to mention. We got a whole slew of Warner Archive announcements. But the one I'm most interested in from this set that we've got that'll be released in August is Pennies from Heaven. This is a Herbert Ross film from the 80s, which stars Steve Martin, Bernadette Peters, and Jessica Harper, among others. It's set during the Great Depression, about a sheet music salesman who is wanting to escape his dreary life. From what I can tell in this movie, and what I've just heard from other people, is that the musical sequences in this film are all lip-synced to like Depression era recordings, which is a very intriguing choice to me. And as a Steve Martin fan, I'm trying to own as many of his films as possible, and I had been waiting for this one to upgrade to Blu-ray for a while, because before it was not as widely available. I think it popped up on the Criterion channel for a little bit, but I'm definitely going to be picking this one up.
Well, and my first pick is also a Warner Archive release, though I guess strictly speaking, there isn't a physical release announced yet, but we know that it's going to be coming soon, and that is Out of the Past. There's a new 4K transfer that's going to be screening, and a home release is coming. And this is one that I have stared at many a Warner Archive sale for the Blu-ray. I mean, the Blu-ray looks great because Warner Archives Blu-rays always do, but this was one where I said to myself, I know that someone is going to release this in 4K, and I'm going to wait, and it has paid off, and I'm glad that Warner Archives doing it themselves because, their work is just impeccable. I don't know what kind of features will be on it, but I mean, just for the print, for the transfer alone, it'll be worth it. And if you're not familiar, Out of the Past is one of the, I mean, any list of the greatest film noirs will have this at least in the top 5, if not at the top. And it's just one of the best out there. Directed by Jacques Tourneur, starring Robert Mitchum, Kirk Douglas, and Jane Greer. Typically very twisty, film noir plot, but yeah, Robert Mitchum is just one of my all-time favorites. And this was one of the ones that kind of really put him on the map. So excited to finally get that on the shelf.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if they end up upgrading any of the other films on their 4 film noir set that Out of the Past was on originally, because that is such a great set. Every single one of those films is a banger. But if what I hear is right, and this Out of the Past 4K restoration is as glorious as people are saying, it's definitely going to be one to buy on its own.
Yeah, for sure. Next, I have another Radiance title to go along with your transmission pick, and this is a box set called Fantastique: The Dreams and Nightmares of French Cinema.
Oh, yes.
So this is one I basically only know of the sort of cinema fantastique from the work of Jean Rollin, who, I don't know if he coined the term himself, but he's the only person that I've really heard the cinema fantastique kind of talked about with. So these are from some other directors. And so cinema fantastique is sort of this very dreamy, effervescent, gauzy, often potentially sapphic and nudity-filled European horror genre. Where there's vampires and gothic things happening. The stories don't necessarily make sense. And this is just from my limited exposure for it. So I'm excited to see if this is always the case or if this was just Jean Rollin's kind of his particular fascinations put on screen, or if other people had other takes on what this sort of micro-genre could be. So one is called Dans la Nuit, and then there's La Nuit Fantastique and Le Diable Soufflé. Or Souffle, perhaps. The Golem, The Woman with Red Boots. So yeah, there's a lot of movies on here. 3 Lives and Only One Death. That's an amazing title. And that one stars Marcello Mastroianni. Man, so
yeah,
this
it looks like that one is an anthology film.
Yeah.
Awesome.
3 Lives and Only One Death. So this is very intriguing to me because Radiance's box sets are just beautiful to behold. And the artwork here features an illustration of what looks like a barely clothed Catherine Deneuve, which very much fits in with the Fantastique. It's a lot of just dreamy plots that don't really make much sense, but it's all about mood and vibe. So excited to see what that is all about. And then the last one is one of the Vinegar Syndrome partner label releases that we didn't have a chance to mention last time. Once again, from AGFA, I just continue to be really interested in what they're doing. They're releasing something called Teenage Riot Video Party, which has 4 films on it from the 1950s and 60s that appear to be kind of like these teen panic pictures about, what are those teenagers doing out with their cars and who knows what. True stories about drugs and salvation, classroom scare films, and nasty exploitation. So yeah, these just, I have no idea what these are about, but they have titles like Lost, Lonely, and Vicious, The Flaming Teenage, and The Narcotic Story. So these just sound fascinating. And once again, it's just great that AGFA is kind of like lifting up these things that are otherwise maybe seen as in the dustbin of history and not that interesting. But yeah, they give them love, and so I'm excited to see what's going on with these movies.
Yeah, these multi-feature sets from AGFA are always so interesting because the individual features themselves are often pretty hit or miss, but the experience, like taking them all together, like the way that they kind of program them on these releases is just an impeccable vibe every time. So
Yeah, and with some of their other ones, they've included things like, vintage TV commercials and trailers and stuff for
Yep.
other things. So it kind of like really immerses you in this slice of forgotten life, from, the not so distant past, but it seems further and further away all the time. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, if we don't have any more coming soon to own picks, we can roll right into our feature presentation.
And now, our feature presentation.
The year is 1645. Most rural Englishmen have no money, but many of them have amazing hats. Oliver Cromwell's Roundheads are making trouble for the Royalists, and a new crop of religious grifters smell opportunity. One of them is Matthew Hopkins, who is barnstorming his way across East Anglia like a proto-Dog the Bounty Hunter, rounding up so-called witches in exchange for fees from local magistrates. The resulting executions provide spectacle for the people and stoke fear of stepping out of line. But Hopkins, a venal man whose carnal appetites take his eye off the prize, may have picked the wrong target when he pursues the beloved of a Roundhead cavalryman who may dash his hopes of becoming the Witchfinder General.
Fantastic synopsis. That really... the amazing hats thing tickled me. That was really good.
I mean, there's like feathers. I mean, the Hopkins hat himself is, yeah.
Truly.
A lot of great hats.
All right, so Witchfinder General, also known as the Conqueror Worm, and we can get into that. But that was your pick this week, and this was a blind buy. You said you did the 88 films 4K.
Yes.
What caused you to pick this up? Do you have any previous history with this movie?
I've been aware of this since I think I first heard about it when I did a stint in grad school in the UK. And this was a movie that friends of mine there always threatened to put on. I guess it has a bit of a reputation. And this was like, this was in 2006, 2007. So it seems like this was maybe a movie that was always on TV there, perhaps. My friends seemed to think that this was, if not a bad movie, at least that Vincent Price was, doing Vincent Price things, which he absolutely is in this movie, which I love. And that's kind of like what attracts me to it. And just the title was I was like, Witchfinder General, what is that? So I've been curious about it for quite some time. And then probably around that time was maybe when it started to be kind of talked about with the other two parts of the so-called unholy trinity of English folk horror, those being The Blood on Satan's Claw and The Wicker Man, the original Wicker Man. So I saw The Wicker Man, which, is amazing movie, one of my favorite horror movies. And so I became interested in these other movies and just obviously the whole folk horror thing in general, which is interesting because if you just kind of look at the promotional material for this, it looks kind of more like a historical, not drama exactly, but a historical thriller of some kind, a historical adventure movie. So I've been curious about the movie for some time. And of course, my history with Vincent Price goes back to just kind of my history with movies in general. We had a couple of these trailer compilations on VHS growing up, one of which was hosted by Vincent Price. It was like when it was in 1987, so it was toward the end of his life, but it was him basically watching trailers from a lot of his old Roger Corman movies and movies of that ilk sort of, and providing little stinger jokes and commentary between them.
That's so weird.
Yeah, it's called Creepy Classics. It's 30 minutes long. I think it's up on YouTube, and it's just a delightful thing to throw on like around Halloween time. That's like my earliest memory of Vincent Price, and he's just totally hamming it up talking about these movie trailers. So I've always loved Vincent Price, and but I really didn't see too many of his movies until I became an adult, to be honest. Obviously, I'd seen Edward Scissorhands, but he's only really kind of like seasoning at the beginning in Edward Scissorhands. You don't really get to see him do much. But he's just one of my favorite people, movie people. He's just so delightful in everything he does.
Yeah.
So what about you? Have you had you seen this, or were you curious about it?
No, yeah, this was my first time watching this, and same as you. I mean, I really enjoyed The Wicker Man. I think it's one of my favorite horror movies that I've seen. And going off of the vibe of The Wicker Man, I was expecting something a little different watching Witchfinder General. Not in a bad way necessarily. I did end up watching this on Tubi, so obviously there were ad breaks and everything, and that's how I came to find out that this was released in the U.S. as The Conqueror Worm.
Is that the version you watched?
No, the version I watched, the main title card was Witchfinder General, but it was labeled The Conqueror Worm on Tubi. And it took me a minute to realize that those were the same thing, because I kept typing Witchfinder General into Tubi, and The Conqueror Worm kept coming up, and I was like, what is this?
Another question. How
Yes.
many pairs of bare breasts did you see in the version that you watched?
Oh, I didn't count.
Okay, well, if that's your answer, then you probably saw the UK version, because that's kind of the main difference, I think, between the two versions. AIP apparently had a lot of notes for Michael Reeves about how much skin appeared, and they wanted more. And that's there's at
least two pairs that I can immediately recall. There may have been others, but
that sounds right for the UK version.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, so I guess I watched the same version that you did, just on Tubi with ads and over the course of 2 nights. But what did you think about Witchfinder General? What are your first impressions?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm again, a lot of it on the strength of Vincent Price and kind of what he brings to the screen. I think the period of history that it covers is just generally really fascinating, like the English Civil War. It's interesting, you know. They give you some. There's like an intro voiceover narration that kind of sets the scene to tell you who the Roundheads are, who Oliver Cromwell is. But it's kind of an interesting time when it doesn't really feel like there were good guys and bad guys. Like there were plenty of reasons to not like the Royalists, plenty of reasons to not like what would come after the English Civil War. But yeah, and it kind of definitely got me thinking about, especially on some of the special features on the disc, they talk about that whole unholy trinity of folk horror and how that came to be, and why this sort of gets grouped together with the other two movies. And it's even, it's often billed as a horror movie, and you might watch it and think, well, why is this really a horror movie? And I think it works with the folk horror label for sure. And thinking about that was kind of a fun exercise, because you do get that sort of, it's in that rural setting. Mm-hmm. There is sort of like almost like a mass psychosis that goes along with like all these people kind of willing to go along with labeling their neighbors as witches, for probably largely out of fear, because they don't want to be named themselves. But just the things that, people were sort of driven to do. And I mean, frankly, the horrific imagery that some of the imagery in the movie is quite horrific, of the executions, mostly done to women. But it doesn't feel, it feels like it's meant to scare you and not to shock in a titillating way. Like, especially like just the burning, like the woman who gets burned at the end, toward the end was like, this is awful. This is awful to watch. I don't feel like it's supposed to be, like it's meant to be entertaining, if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah, if this was an exploitation film, those scenes would have played out very differently. Or if this was more of a straightforward horror movie, I think it might have been more like mean-spirited, maybe towards the people who are experiencing the violence. But yeah, no, you're right. The violence in this is definitely more meant to scare or startle than titillate.
And it almost clashes with Vincent Price's presence sometimes, because he's so arch. Mm-hmm. But ultimately I feel like it works because he is Matthew Hopkins is this very conniving creature of the time. So it's kind of interesting you can almost hear the gears of his mind moving when he's trying to figure out what to do next, how he can bend each situation to his, monetary gain. Because he's basically, going around, and he and his partner are finding people to name as witches, or if someone gives them a tip, they'll round them up on behalf of the local law enforcement and have them executed, and basically collect like a bounty. And that's his whole thing. He's just riding around doing that. Kind of almost like a paramilitary wing of he's not part of the Roundheads, and as we see later, he's kind of like, is pursued by some of them, but he's definitely taking advantage of the general terror of the time. So, yeah. And interestingly, I don't know if you this is a tidbit that you caught in any of your reading about the movie, but Michael Reeves wanted Donald Pleasance to play Matthew Hopkins. Like that was his first choice.
I think that might have made the movie better.
And he did not want, like, because AIP helped finance it, and they said, obviously, like, Vincent Price was their kind of like the stud of their stable, and they said, like, it needs to be Vincent Price because they just had such a great string of success with him, and they felt like, I guess they felt like it would fit, like, oh, it's a period piece, even though I don't know if they read the script to see what it was about. But Michael Reeves, even while they were filming, like, they didn't get along well. He kind of felt like Donald Pleasance was the guy he wanted, but it would have obviously been a very different portrayal than just like they were saying, like in stature he's very different. He would have had kind of like more of a chip on his shoulder and been less charismatic. So it's
much
interesting.
More sinister, I would imagine.
Oh, totally. So I would also watch that version totally, but I really enjoy what we got just because Vincent Price is, choose every piece of scenery he's in.
Yeah. I'm a little more lukewarm on this film than you are. Not to say I didn't enjoy it at all. Yeah, I did enjoy parts of this, absolutely. I think where I'm getting stuck is kind of the discord between Vincent Price and all the stuff that he's doing, and then the violence and talking about this quote unquote mass psychosis thing, or the witchcraft, or like the idea of using God and religion to justify your cruel acts. Like there's all of that stuff happening in this movie, and then there's also Vincent Price just, to me, kind of sticking out like a sore thumb, and I think it was clashing for me in a way that like was just not working for me. But I see the appeal of it for sure, and I think kind of similar to like the past couple of times on this show where I've come out of a movie not loving it, but then getting to talk about it on the show and work through things that I don't like about it and maybe discover a different angle is going to be helpful to me. And I think also I went into this with too narrow of a definition of what folk horror can be, because this did not read folk horror to me almost at all.
What were the pieces you felt were missing, or what were the pieces you felt didn't fit?
I think a lot of it is like the music feels very like, especially during the chase sequences, there's very much of an epic adventure feel to it.
The end's kind of a
felt out of place.
Sure.
Yeah, swashbuckling. Yeah. Like I've seen reviews from like contemporary reviews of this film calling it like a British Western, which I feel is a much more accurate label, I think.
And I think that's what Michael Reeves wanted to make. I think that's even how they pitched it. Yeah.
And even like again with Donald Pleasance being in the role, that's definitely, it would fit the mold of like a Western villain in my mind.
Like Wake and Fright. I mean, that's
Yep. Yeah. So like, man, what a movie that would have been. But anyway, the music didn't match the mood for me. I definitely understand like the people out in an isolated location, like that being there. There is a lot of the location shooting stuff that does kind of read folk horror, with being, in forests and this muted-ish color palette with lots of greens and orange in the nature, but then also, the pops of color, like with the thick, goopy red blood and all that. That's why I'm saying I think I might have gone in with too narrow of a definition of folk horror. I want to know what is calling to you as folk horror and how it ties in with something like The Wicker Man.
Well, I think The Wicker Man is an interesting comparison, because if you think of like, I don't think most people would accuse Christopher Lee of being the most subtle of actors either. And while I think in The Wicker Man he's not going quite as big as Vincent Price, but he is a similar sort of like charismatic driver of action, whereas I mean that the setup there is very different. It's like everyone's on his side, like and the cop in that movie is almost like the bad guy. I think that's that's at least that's my reading on it. You're kind of cheering for the people who are doing all the awful things by the end of it. But in that way, it's sort of like an interesting inversion, I suppose, of like, you have the main guy here is doing the awful stuff, and is very much an opportunist. But a movie that I thought of as a comparison for on the folk horror piece, though, it's more contemporary, is The Witch, because there's readings of The Witch, like depending on what you think of The Witch, there might not really be a witch per se, right? Like there's definitely suggestions that it was all like there could be zero supernatural elements in that film, and but there's certainly people with religious fervor, right, who are driven by external pressures. In that case, it's like isolation, perhaps. Some kind of a strange disease or famine. Who knows what's going on with them out there all by themselves. And they're driven to sort of start believing things, doing things to each other, and sort of taking leave of their senses. And the results are horrific. And here you get kind of a similar thing that happens, except it's kind of all, political, it's paranoia. So that's kind of how I could see it fitting in. And again, this is all kind of like, it sounds like this may have been, this whole unholy trinity thing is kind of, it might have been like one person's idea that was thrown out there, like within the last 10 or 20 years, and maybe it doesn't fit at all. But it's kind of an interesting framework to think about it. And you can take it or leave it.
Yeah, no, what you're saying makes sense. And I think a lot of the reason why this wasn't fitting in that quote unquote mold or whatever is stylistically.
It's very different. And I think some of that is like commercial too. If you think about like kind of the direction that even Hammer was starting to take at that time, it was less gothic and more like, we gotta get some boobs on the screen. We gotta get some more blood and more kind of
action.
Like, very lurid films.
This also feels it feels very like contemporary in its cutting style. Like there's lots of quick cutting, lots of shots that could easily have been, your typical the period like tracking shots of two people talking or whatever, or unbroken conversations. And a lot of this movie is made up of quick cuts to close-ups or medium close-ups of people who are in conversation, but you're not seeing them in frame together. And a lot of that feels very opposite from, the kind of staid, like gothic presentation of these kinds of films, at least that I've seen. That kind of, it doesn't quite mesh with what I think would be the definition of folk horror. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Totally. And one cut that I actually made note of, there's a jump cut after the horrific burning scene to a bunch of kids making like baked potatoes, and I don't know if it was the ashes of that pyre, or if it was a different pyre.
No, I think it was.
But that was like, it was like, oh my God, that is like, I mean, kind of funny, but also pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, they were trying to get people in there, trying to make people laugh, I guess, to season what was going on here. But I mean, again, there are parts that were not maybe terrifying in the tradition, in like the horror movie sense, that were still like scary to think about. Cause like stuff like this did happen. It's almost like the movie pauses to show like, okay, let's show you some of what this was actually like. And then let's go back to the fun stuff. So I will admit there is definitely some, it does have some tonal shifts in it. There's no doubt. And yeah, if they had Pleasance instead of Price, it's maybe a lot of that goes away.
Yeah, I don't know. What I do really enjoy about this movie is the scenes where they are confronting the people who are supposed to be witches, and how they kind of don't really give them a choice to like prove themselves wrong, because they already go in being like, because this is a monetary thing really for Hopkins and his partner Stern. So they're just here to kind of do their job, and if people get hurt or die, that's just kind of how it is. But the scenes where they are confronting the people who are accused of being witches, and then the methods that they take to try to get them to confess or prove that they're witches, are at times pretty difficult to watch, even through the obviously fake looking blood. But I think a lot of it has to do with the performances of the people, the screams that we linger on for a really long time. Often during these sequences,
when they're getting skewered with ice picks to find the moles
or even like when they're being lowered into the water to see, if you float, then you're a witch, but if you sink, then we were wrong, you weren't a witch. But there was a pretty comical shot actually of of the three like corpses or whatever being raised out of the water. They were just dangling by a string. I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, those sequences really stood out to me as particularly well done and definitely unnerving and scary.
Yeah, and I mean, have you seen the Devils? Ken Russell's The Devils?
No, I haven't. I'm holding out until the new version, or not new
Yes.
version, but restored version.
No, totally. Yeah, the upcoming of upcomings, if you will. Yeah, I'm so excited for that. So that's another movie that actually this conversation has got me thinking about, because it is similarly, I mean, the guy, you've got Oliver Reed at the center of that, who is playing big, but not in the way that Vincent Price is, because nobody was like him.
Yeah.
But that movie has some similar tonal shifts between just completely kind of zany things that happen and then some really horrific scenes of like bodily torture. Yep, it would be a fascinating double feature once that new 4K drops. Yeah, I'm excited for more people to experience that movie for the first time. So
Yeah, I'm eager to check it out.
and that's one that I think I don't really feel like you hear the folk horror tag applied to that as much, because it's like ripped from the headline, so to speak. It's an event that actually happened within the Catholic Church, but I think there's definitely some folk horror, undertones to that one as well. So
Something that some of these witchcraft accusation scenes reminded me of was a movie I watched maybe about a month ago now. It's from 1943 called Day of Wrath, directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer. And it's about a young woman who's married to an elderly pastor, and she falls in love with the pastor's son and ends up getting accused of being a witch. But throughout the film, other characters around her are being accused of witchcraft. And in a very similar way to the scenes that we get in Witchfinder General, these scenes are haunting. But in that movie, I didn't feel that the scenes were overly violent or, very in your face. And I think the first couple of witchcraft accusation and torture scenes in this movie are that way, but then as the movie progresses, they kind of get more and more like audacious, more bloody. It's no holds barred on the gore and what they were able to do at that time. But Days of Wrath is definitely worth checking out as an alternate angle to the kind of witchcraft and suspicion tale.
yeah, I have that previously watch listed, but I got to get to that. Dreyer he was so good. So I at least watched or skimmed all the featurettes that were on the disc. But I would love to hear more of a breakdown of what Reeves' original vision was versus what it drifted into with, because it sounds like the AIP producers were like watching the rushes and stuff and had a lot of notes, led to the Conqueror Worm version coming out in the States. It would be interesting to see what else he might have wanted to do that he wasn't able to do had he not had those pressures.
I wonder if any more was ever going to happen during the initial sex montage between Richard and Sarah. Because in this version, it's admittedly, at least a little silly to me, because, you've got all the close-up, the montage style, like editing of their meeting together. I wonder if anything more was ever going to happen with that.
Yeah, there's a 30-minute featurette with the original editor, his assistant, and the sound editor, just talking about the editing of the film. So I watched about 10 minutes of that. I wasn't able to watch all of it, but I mean they had lots of stories. So it'd be fascinating to watch the rest of that. I should say, like, Michael Reeves tragically passed away due to an overdose of some kind not long after this movie came out. He was like 25 years old or something like that.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. Within a few months, I think, of this movie premiering, he was gone. I'd love to see, because he had a couple other movies before this. So I'd love to see the rest of his work, and it's a shame to think of what else could have come, because it does seem like he was kind of leveling up each time out from what I've read.
Do you want to talk at all about the Hopkins character basically capturing Sarah's uncle as an excuse to sleep with her and like kind of get what he wants in that way? Because that was part of the movie that I was not really anticipating, and I thought was definitely an interesting way to kind of like instantly villainize the Hopkins character even more than he already is, and also kind of give you that sense of this character like having all those machinations in his head of like how he can get what he wants based on what's going on around him.
Yeah, and it ends up being kind of the seeds of his downfall because, it sparks this revenge quest by Cornet Richard Marshall, who we should say. So Ian Ogilvy plays the Roundhead cavalryman who is sort of, at first, just becomes basically engaged to Sarah, who is the niece, right? Was she the niece of
Yes.
the niece of this priest, this parish priest who is kind of the first big target that we see pursued by Hopkins. And it sort of is also an excuse to get some more lurid stuff with the John Stern character, sort of like climbing up on a ladder to spy on Hopkins and what he's doing with Sarah up in the upper story of the farmhouse and whatnot. I thought it was an interesting way to kick off the action and provide a just an interesting arc, because she's pretty cunning too. She's able to kind of like, she tries to kind of play Hopkins off to kind of get her like, if I can do this for him, maybe he'll end up sparing my uncle, but it was not to be. But she tries.
And to the credit of the Richard Marshall character, when he returns to the town and finds out what all has happened, and especially what's happened to Sarah, he doesn't blame her for anything that happened, and like immediately decides to marry her and then set off on this revenge mission, which takes up the rest of the film. But I thought that was a really great character beat from Richard.
No, I thought Ogilvy was a great he was a good choice. There's a long interview with him on the disc also from just a couple of years ago, so it was fun to hear his perspectives on the movie. I guess he like didn't really, I mean, except for the climax, he didn't really have much on-set time with Vincent Price, but he said it was fascinating working with him, and yeah, definitely that Reeves grumbled a lot about having to have switched to him instead of Donald Pleasance.
The couple of horseback chase scenes in this movie are very energetic. It's just another thing in this movie that I wasn't expecting, and like I said before, they're edited very well, and I love the color of the nature that comes out because they shot all of this on location during those sequences. I thought they look good even on Tubi. I don't know how the 4K looks, but
yeah, 4K looks good. Yeah, those were really well done. There's some action set pieces toward the end when they are storming the castle to go in. That was some pretty thrilling stuff to finish in. So it did kind of feel like they were kitchen sinking it a little bit, and that they wanted to have some action, they wanted to have some romance and some sex, some horror. So yeah, a pretty good job of mixing it all together, of getting all those in there, even if the sort of transitions from one to the other could definitely be jarring at times.
Did you want to mention any little extraneous bits you wanted to point out?
Yeah, I got a few little extra bits. I really enjoyed the I forget what there's a one scene character that Hopkins toady interacts with toward the end, who asks, "What line of business are you in?" And he says, "God's business, witch-finding." He's like, "Witch-finding? That's nice. That's very nice." And then he asks him if he wants. So that was another sort of little arch character thrown in that kind of felt like he was more in Vincent Price's movie than the more horrific stuff that's happening. Another interesting tidbit from the features, I guess the sound was totally borked for whatever on the whole movie. They had to re-record all the sound, everything, like the dialogue, the Foley, everything. And they took that as an excuse to, or a chance to completely overdub the Stern character with somebody else's voice. They got a voice actor to do the voice acting for John Stern, which is fascinating because I feel like sometimes you can tell, know. But it was really smooth, and I thought that character was kind of added was an interesting foil, kind of pretty nasty, to Hopkins. So that was kind of striking to hear.
Yeah, I did notice there were a couple of times throughout the movie where Vincent Price's mouth didn't quite match up with what he was saying. So I was wondering if they had to dub over at least him. But yeah, I never would have thought they would have had to redo every part of the audio.
They re-recorded everything. So that was a fascinating bit. Yeah, they swim. The mark of Satan is upon them when they throw the people in the water, which apparently one of the commentators said like that was, I guess by the time that this film was set, that was actually codified as no longer being an acceptable way to figure out if someone was a witch or not, unless the people submitted to it themselves, which is kind of an insane provision to have in a law, because the whole idea of it is that like you're basically agreeing to either have yourself drowned or then to have yourself otherwise executed because of the kind of no-win situation it is.
Yeah, who's coming up with these rules? It's
Crazy people. Question for you. If you were to consort with Satan, what animal would be your familiar? Because that's one of the things they're always accusing people of, like, oh, he was consorting with a familiar.
Yeah. I mean, the classic one is the black cat, but I don't want to do classic. Let's see. Let me see. Types of familiars. Google, don't fail me now. I am not well versed in this stuff. I wish I was. I need to take the time to do it. Okay, so this totally unreviewed image that I'm seeing here shows that beavers could be a witch's familiar, known for their cooperation, resourcefulness, and vision. Huh.
A beaver.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be a beaver.
I'd probably go for something subtle so I could perhaps consort with my familiar on the DL. So maybe like a spider or something. That maybe not a beaver.
Not a beaver.
That would be very obvious that I was talking to a beaver. But a spider that maybe would crawl out of my coat, out from under my coat neck every now and then, and I could sort of like whisper to it. That's probably what I would go for.
Oh yeah, that's smart.
Yeah,
an owl would be cool.
Classic. That's a classic.
Yeah.
Well, I guess last thing maybe I watched through on the 4K. They can sort of due to some like branching, they let you basically see the U.S. scenes pretty easily, and it basically all seemed to come down to like anytime there was a woman in the frame in a tavern or something, instead of having like her breasts were out for some reason, it appeared to be a lot of the same scenes. They just did it, but instead they must have just like once more without a corset or something like that, and that's a lot of what the U.S. cut is like instead.
That always makes me laugh when you realize that there were alternate takes used in alternate versions, like what they had to tell the actors and everything about why they're needing alternate takes or whatever. That always makes me laugh.
What about you? Any extra things you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
Oh yeah, when John Stern gets shot by one of the Roundheads, and he tries to take the bullet out of his arm by just kind of like wedging a knife in there.
Total Rambo move.
Yeah, that really stood out to me as like, whoa, why would you do it like that? There's got to be a better way. You mentioned the amazing hats at the top during the synopsis, but I have to shout out the absolutely ginormous belts and buckles that each one of the Roundheads are wearing. Just outrageously large.
And then so Oliver Cromwell does appear in one scene, and he has like the biggest belt buckle of them all on his shoulder.
Yes. Just a great detail. And I can totally imagine some production designer and their team trying to make these out of whatever materials were around.
Yeah, and the appearance of Cromwell, I'm sure, means a lot more to, English people and people who are more well-versed in, the English Civil War generally in the history. It was probably kind of like a Leo pointing moment for him to show up. Yep.
Yeah, it's like, that's the guy. The slowly dipping the witch into the fire was definitely the most gruesome death in this, but her husband, I think, who was looking on, his reaction was quite silly is the word I'll use, but I just thought it was definitely not the right reaction to the moment. So that was just, I wanted to point that out. That was funny. And then Richard Marshall's response to Hopkins getting shot as he's butchering him, basically. One of the Roundheads shoots Hopkins, I guess, to put him out of his misery, because he sees Marshall just hacking away at him. And he screams, "You took him from me," like 5 times. And it's like one of the last things you see in the movie. And it is very, like, that's disturbing, because you haven't seen
totally.
that guy act out like that before. And that works really well for me. And then combine that with Hilary Dwyer, who plays Sarah, just like letting loose these primal screams at the very end. Yeah. It's super disturbing. Great way to end the movie. But yeah, that's it for me. Is this a keeper for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you gotta have the Trinity together. I could put it up on the shelf next to Blood on Satan's Claw and Wicker Man. So yeah, I'm happy to have it.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, and that wraps up our discussion of the Witchfinder General. So that brings us to letters from friends. You can reach out to us at blindbuyspod@gmail.com with any thoughts about recent episodes, stuff you've been watching, or just anything about physical media in general. And this week we do have a letter from our friend Brandon.
Yes, Brandon says, "Blind Buys Boys. Recently, Criterion released the fantastic Wes Anderson box, announced the much-anticipated Kubrick set, and rumors abound that the full Lynch is imminent. These releases have made me wonder if the two of you have any dream director box sets you'd like to will into existence, and which boutique company you think would serve them best. Personally, I'd like to see what the new Arrow sub-label Toy Robot could do with the full Joe Dante filmography. The ultimate dream, of course, would be a Vinegar Syndrome Andy Sedaris omnibus with art direction and packaging to match the salacious material. Keep up the great work on the show, Brandon." Thank you so much, Brandon. And yes, the Andy Sedaris omnibus is the holy grail.
Yeah, that's a total Vinegar Syndrome release waiting to happen. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And we hit on some of, like, I would say maybe some of the more obvious ones when we had our emergency pod on the Kubrick box. So I would, if you haven't listened to that, that was a fun episode to do, where we talk about some of the, I guess, more low-hanging fruit, but it was fun to think about this more. And one that came to mind for me would be to do, if someone were to come out with like a 3 from Catherine Bigelow, say, because she has a few really big releases from early in her filmography that really are kind of languishing still in the DVD era.
Yeah.
Near Dark is fine. There is a Near Dark coming. We know that's happening. I don't know if who's doing it yet, but that's rumored to be coming. But I'm thinking if you did like a Near Dark, Strange Days, and then Blue Steel, which is a film she did with Jamie Lee Curtis, which that's been put out in a couple of neo-noir box sets. So that's out there already. But I think having those 3, because that's kind of like her early to middle period where she was still doing pretty pulpy kind of genre picks before she kind of moved to what she's doing now with these kind of really gritty, grim, historically based things. That to me is kind of the pocket that I enjoy most from her. And Strange Days is one of the most notorious ones. I think it's like an out of print DVD or something. It's the only way to, or at least for a very long time, was the only way to see that. And that's just a great sort of cyberpunky movie. So, and I think I would pick Arrow to release this one if I had my druthers.
Yeah, no, that totally tracks, I think. Especially in Near Dark, I could see them putting that out for sure.
What's one you would love to see?
I think that either Severin or Synapse Films needs to put out this box set, but it needs to be the complete works of William Lustig. And I say Severin because they do those, like, full compilations of directors who might, have a reputation for being, trashy or low budget or, exploitation filmmakers. And I could see it very easily being in one of those, like, cigarette box style.
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
Cases where you take the top off and you slip out the cases. But the reason I say Synapse Films is because they, between them and Blue Underground, I believe they have the rights to his Maniac Cops the Maniac Cop films that he did, the 3 of those, and then just the film Maniac, which stars Joe Spinell. So there might be some rights issues in there. I think Severin could kill it with a William Lustig box set, getting all 3 Maniac Cops together, his Uncle Sam film, Vigilante, some of his earlier stuff. I think that is ripe for the picking, because some of that stuff has not gotten the treatment that it very well could have. And William Lustig he's really grown on me lately as a director. I dig his stuff. It's super gritty. Very often exploring the seedy underbelly of New York City, a very exploitative way. So I think definitely Severin could not go wrong with that.
Yeah, and that would fit right in with Andy Milligan and like Ray Dennis Steckler box sets that they've put out yet. Yeah,
I agree.
Put a big old cigarette carton full of movies next to those ones. Yeah, yeah. Another one that came to mind for me, very much a sort of trash auteur, Albert Pyun. I think you could put together a really cool box of his films that are just so much fun. A guy who just loved to make movies, and you kind of see an Albert Pyun movie and you know that it's his work. And this one, I feel like it would be. I mean, I guess Vinegar Syndrome would be a good one, but maybe even something like, I don't know, like a Mondo Macabro or somebody like that could put out like. I mean, he directed so many movies. You could go really, really deep and put out some stuff that hasn't seen the light of day on physical in a long time. Or you could aim a little bit higher and get something like Radioactive Dreams on there with like Nights. Kind of go for some of his more like post-apocalyptic fantasy type films. Would be fun to have a box of those out there. Yeah, for sure. You got any others?
One more I thought I'd mention, just because I've seen most of these and I feel like they would go well together in some kind of packaging, is the work of Edgar Wright. At least up to this point, he's done 9 fictional features. He's got some documentary work in there and some shorts and stuff like that. And of course, with the Cornetto trilogy, those are already together on a 4K set that's just been put out by the studios. But putting those 3 films next to Scott Pilgrim, next to Baby Driver, I think they're all kind of a piece. His work feels pretty consistent for the most part across, especially his earlier stuff. Last Night in Soho, I really enjoyed. I think people have mixed thoughts on that movie, but I feel like it belongs. And then The Running Man from last year, I really, really enjoyed that movie. And
still need to catch up with it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it deserves a bit more than just the standard studio treatment. So I would love to see a box set of his work, maybe when he gets to 10 films or whatever. This definitely would not be a Criterion release. Maybe Arrow? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Nice. One last one I'll mention, because she might be my favorite, one of my favorite working filmmakers for sure. Something like a Kelly Reichardt Goes West box. I think almost every movie of hers you could describe as a Western of one kind or another. But I could see Criterion putting out, because they have some of these already, but like something like throw in First Cow, Wendy and Lucy, Old Joy, and Meek's Cutoff, because Meek's Cutoff is one that I really want to have, but it's just kind of like, it has an old oscilloscope Blu-ray, and that's the only thing it has. Like, it really could use a 4K. Yeah, I just love her work. She's still at it, and First Cow just had that sort of like, it wasn't even like an official A24. It wasn't like an A24 physical release. Somebody else, whoever helps them put movies out, put it out. And I think First Cow deserves a nicer release than what it currently has. But yeah, Kelly Reichardt Goes West. Criterion, give it to me.
I've got to see more of her work. I've only seen Showing Up and The Mastermind, which came out earlier this year, or at the end of last year.
You're in for a treat. Meek's Cutoff. That's my favorite. Yeah, I love Meek's Cutoff. And just her work with Michelle Williams. It's just like one of the great cinematic partnerships of this or any era, I think.
Yeah, I got to add that to the watch list right now.
Brandon, thank you so much. It's fun to dream about things like this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Again, you can reach us at blindbuyspod@gmail.com with any letters. And since we've wrapped those up, that just leaves us to pick the next film. So, Josh, what will we be watching for the next episode?
All right. I have two wildly different movies in front of me. And I told myself I was going to make the decision in the moment. So here we go. Do I go obscure or mainstream? One of these is a relatively new boutique release from a label that we have not discussed a film from yet on the show. The other one is just a Studio 4K, but I know that a ton of people have seen. So what to pick? Okay, I think I'm going to go mainstream this time and obscure next time. So we are going to do Wolf of Wall Street next episode. I have not seen this, but this 4K has been lurking around on my shelf for a long time. So yeah, Scorsese's Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio. We'll be hitting that next episode.
Excellent. One that I've only seen once on DVD, I think. And I remember thinking, this is it? This is what
really?
people are... Yeah. I was underwhelmed, I have to say. So I'm excited, but I've wanted to revisit.
Interesting.
It's one of those where I felt like this has to be, is this a me problem? So this is one that's been on my to rewatch pile for a while. So I'm excited to go back and have an excuse to do it and see what I think this time.
Yeah, and then I'm saving this second pick for next time, so we'll still get to do the obscure one, and just we'll just do a Scorsese first, and then get back to the other smaller stuff.
There you go. All right, well, you heard it. Next time on Blind Buys, we'll be discussing Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street. So we'll see you then.
Bye, everybody.